Hi, everyone. This is Chris Lozano again with my second segment of my original composition project. Right here, I have Allison Wynne, who she will introduce herself really quickly. Go ahead, Allie.
Hi, my name's Allie. I am a sophomore IES major, which is Integrated Educational Studies, and a Leadership Studies minor.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so again, Allie, the reason I asked you to come on to this podcast slash web series is due to the fact that I want to gauge and understand your perspective on environmental issues. Again, this is for a environmental rhetoric class. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically trying to get general opinion from, normal people, everyday people about the environment, but more specifically, environmental sustainability and how that correlates with education today. So you being an IES major, you know the educational system a little bit better than most people, in my opinion. From what I know of you, being you also a friend of mine. So obviously, I want to ask, what's your general view about the education system today? This can go from preschool to kindergarten, or even today in higher education, which is like colleges and universities. So
Today, our education system has changed and grown a lot. In one of my education classes, we started studying the theories and how education started and how schools started way back in the 1800s and how far we've come today, which is a wonderful thing to look at. But it also gives hope for further change. There are definitely a lot of issues within our education system that need to be addressed. And one of those issues is about how we are teaching the environment in our educational system, whether that be as young as pre-K or preschool through K through 12 schooling, whether that be public or private, and to higher ed. So I think something that's interesting for me is that once you get into, if you choose the route to go to college and pursue higher education, we start to lose this interdisciplinary factor of schooling. In K through 12, there are obviously laws that you need to be learning, certain curriculum, and a range of disciplines, whether that be math, social studies, reading, writing, science. But as you approach this higher education, we start to kind of lose that interdisciplinarity, and that can be harmful because the people that are getting the further education in science are people that choose to go into the science world. If you're not choosing to go down that realm, understandable, you do you. But we are losing that holistic education. So I think there needs to be lots of improvements in the world of education, just as in any other discipline. I think too that there's also issues with just the teaching itself and whether students are lately, I'm sure anybody listening to this podcast or watching this could agree that in school they have just memorized things to memorize and to regurgitate the facts, and they haven't learned things. And whether that be in something like a science class and you're just memorizing the muscles, or you're just memorizing the chemistry terminology in your vocab, but how much of that did you really take in and learn? So I think something that I know we're discussing in my education classes is how to better teach, how to further students' understanding. And it's a difficult thing to cover because there's a lot of different aspects, whether that be learning disabilities or different socioeconomic statuses where the school is, or funding in general from our government. But I completely agree that there needs to be better educational resources and better teaching of science matters.
Perfect. So now your educational background is that you went to what, Marina High School in Huntington Beach.
Yes.
Before that you went to your local middle school and elementary school, and now you attend Chapman University as well. Now, let's take a little bit of a side aspect in terms of like the teaching quality, for example. Let's compare Marina High School to Chapman University. How would you say, for example, the cleanliness has, like, in terms of like, you know, some high schools will have giant solar panels over their parking garage or parking lots. Some universities do that too. How would you say your experience at Marina High School has changed when with your time being here at Chapman? That semester and a half before COVID, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, interesting that you kind of bring up the note about solar panels over um, parking structures. Was that the summer after I graduated in June, that July, the following month, they started that progress to build solar panels over the parking structure. And that's now done, actually, which is awesome. Um, so that's been a great improvement that we've seen at my high school versus Chapman. There is something that concerns me is how often we see that we are tearing up Memorial Lawn and replanting and um, redoing the lawn and the grass right there. Um, Personally, I don't know how eco-friendly and like sustainable that is. But that's something that's always kind of caught my eye at Chapman. Um, I think there I think the main difference though is that Chapman has the funding to do this as we attend a private institution. Rather, K through 12, I went through all public schooling, and Chapman's been my first private schooling. And that's been a major factor that I think also really plays into environmental sustainability. And I mean, this reaches across all disciplines of finance and economics and business and whatnot. But the funding, I think, is huge in comparison in how they are using their funding and what they're using it for, how they're um, replacing different, I don't know, how they're just utilizing their money. My public high school is obviously not being funded nearly as much as what Chapman has. And they just recently, in the last 2 years, just did that solar panel parking structure. Versus, to be quite frank, I don't really know what sustainability there is at Chapman. I can think of the water bottle filling stations in different buildings, but that's really all that I can think of off the top of my head, which I guess is kind of concerning that that's
Yeah.
all I can recognize. I'm sure there are much more, and this is just being an outsider. But yeah, that's kind of what I would say.
Yeah, and it's actually funny enough that you mentioned this. You are now the. With that being said, my first participant, her background is homeschool education. She did not see the type of, universities like lifestyle. Obviously, we have a lot of people who work at Chapman focusing on the cleanliness of the school, but that's not necessarily being sustainable. We don't have a whole lot of sustainability here at the university, and that's something I've noticed as well. One big thing I would want to point out is that apparently, from what I've heard, Chapman does take up a lot of our electrical grid in the city of Orange because they keep the lights on at night and even during the shutdowns and stuff like that. That is what I've heard from other students being here at Chapman, and that's just due to the fact that they keep the lights on at night, and they keep some lights on overnight just to keep the campus lit up for safe travels and stuff like that. And obviously that's a safety thing, but I'm not necessarily certain. I mean, I think there are solar panels up by the tennis courts, but besides that, I don't necessarily know where a lot of their electric is going towards or where it's coming from. And that's in my opinion, the university not being fully sustainable. or eco-friendly for that matter. Obviously, there are students who are concerned, students who want to focus on other things, but how would your experience, like if let's talk about university wise, at least let's talk about higher education. um, Universities, they have that kind of aspect of teaching environmental science. Obviously, Chapman offers it here. I'm in a class that focuses on environmental awareness and rhetoric and stuff like that. It's a rhetoric class. I like that class. That's why I'm doing this project here. But you know, with that being said, how would we say, do we see a more aware student body at Chapman? People being eco-friendly, obviously, with a lot of activism being, especially today with all this other social movements, have we seen the same thing happen with environmental awareness? Do we see the same amount of information being put out about overfishing, whaling? Do we see people put out a lot of information about how we should be recycling more, stuff like that? Do you as well, because you're more of an activist than I am, do you think that same information is being distributed as equally as other things that are going on today?
No, absolutely not. It's not being equally distributed. And yes, there are plenty of social movements and a lot of activism within our university, which is fantastic to see. Um, and that is also something that's happened over the last not even year, maybe the last 10 months. Um, and over my time at Chapman, the past, what, year and a half, maybe,
Yeah.
2 years almost, I have not seen the same concern and just spreading of awareness and education regarding environmental sustainability. Not at all.
Okay. And thank you for that opinion as well. Now, as an education major, I'm going to ask you a more of a synthesis type question. If you were an environmental teacher, for example, because I know that your specific field is more focusing on younger ages, if I'm not wrong. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How would you, as a future teacher, want to encourage your students to get more involved with the environment, be more sustainable and eco-friendly? How would you do that?
That's a great question. I would definitely start with, I think just hands-on learning is fantastic. I mean, due to COVID and what's going on now, this is so unpredictable, but I think field trips are one way to definitely encourage that understanding and spark that like interest within students. Um, I also think different um, videos, educational videos about science, as well as hands-on activities, whether that be different experiments, projects, and having guest lecturers come in. Like you said, I'm definitely pursuing more elementary education, but it's not too early at all. If anything, it needs to get started in pre-K and kindergarten, because as from those elementary ages of kindergarten to fifth grade, there is so much cognitive development that if we were able to instill these values and how important it is to learn about being eco-friendly and being environmentally sustainable, I think that could really make a difference. Because the thing about teaching and the thing about education as a whole is this is our future.
Yeah.
Like, yes, our generation, our age group right now, we are students in college. We are the future, but the future is also the generation below us. And that's definitely something I have like a passion for, is obviously teaching the younger generation and inspiring them. So even now that you're bringing this to my awareness, this is really able to ignite a spark in me about, wow, I really do need to teach this. I do need to implement this because it is so important. When I reflect back onto my elementary school days, I remember like maybe kind of learning a little bit about like turn the water off when you brush your teeth and like turn all the lights off when you're not in the room. I remember those things, and it is important because I still do those things. Even when I learned it when I was 6 years old in first grade, I still do that at 19 years old because it is so crucial. So if you can see how important it is to educate at such a young age, they take those skills with them. Um, so I think if we're able to educate more than those foundational skills, that would be excellent. But you definitely do have to look at your age range and just their own cognitive development
Mhm.
before we can start doing oil spills, overfishing, and whatnot. But
Yeah.
that's primarily because I want to be in kinder through second or third grade. But as soon as you get into junior high, even fifth grade, middle school for sure, 100% high school, um, there definitely needs to be
That
more of
real.
an enforced environmental curriculum for sure.
So that's actually really funnily enough. I'm gonna go over this. So at the end of my speaking with my participants, maybe I should be stating this now, but I'm gonna say it just for the record is that I after these participants, you, Joseph Graziano and Ariana Popa, who I interviewed before you, um, I actually I'm gonna do a synthesis, which will come at the end of this film and slash podcast. Now, my thesis was originally, and you hit this kind of on the nail, is that I believe that higher education is important and that we should be reinforcing all of these things about environmentalism and eco-sustainability, but it doesn't occur, and that foundation needs to be set at a very young age. So you hit that perfectly on the nail, where your emphasis on creating that behavior and creating that foundation of saying, hey, let's just turn off the lights, turn off the water when you're not using it. All of those are fantastic things that actually coincide with my comparison to the literature. There's a whole blog slash academic journal that I have for my discussion at the end of this project, where I'm going to be focusing on how by teaching younger generations, you're more likely to get a more eco-aware community. And genuinely, when I say that, I'm grateful for you being able to be here as well, because of the fact that you hit that very much on the nail. That was perfect. So thank you for that as well.
Of course, of course. It's something I'm very passionate about is education, and there's there's so much to come in education as
Yeah.
well.
And I guess with that being said, I want to focus on and gravitate toward or more of a conclusion statement, because we are running out of time soon. But that's not for any falter. That was this is fantastic, and this is exactly what I was hoping for out of these podcasts. And with that being said, a lot of things that I've been predicting in terms of thesis wise have been fantastic. So I'm going to continue going with this. But now I'm going to open the floor to you, Allie, and I'm going to ask you: is there anything you would like to tell the audience? Because with that being said, my class will have the option of being able to watch this, as I stated. My professor will be viewing this as well. Is there any major statements you want to make about this topic, anything like that, or any questions you would like to ask me? Because with my last one, for example, I stated where my personal beliefs were on the situation. I kind of hinted at if you just briefly, just right before I just said that. So is there anything any final concluding statement you want to leave, and then I'll leave mine as well based on our interaction here?
Yeah, I think that I completely agree with what you were saying and how this needs to be taught at a younger age so they are able to establish these behaviors, these actions, as well as their thoughts and what's important in environmental studies, honestly. And when you look through, I have a sense just being involved in education, but when you look through elementary school state standards, you have to, yes, in science we address it's very minimal. It's not a college physics course, but there are physics, like astrology, a little bit of biology, life science. We involve those into our curriculum for sure. But when I sit here and reflect on that, I think we touch on environmentalism but not really its importance, and not how much we should, especially with where our environment is right now. I think that's something that needs to heavily be enforced in the upcoming years of education to be able to save our environment. We need to start by educating the youth for sure. Um, and that's something I'll definitely implement into my own future classroom. So I'm glad that you had me on here. I'm very, very flattered and happy to be here and to help because it's definitely sparked this passion, like, wow, I do need to do this, and something I'm definitely going to think about more and keep looking into.
Thank you. And now I'm going to leave my concluding statement for the record of the audience and stuff. Thank you, Allie, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for taking your time out of the day. Thank you for your dog Ruby being in the corner. Such a cute little guy. But with that being said, my final conclusion based off of this in comparison with Ariana's from yesterday, for example, is that it is very important that we get more hands-on. She had a very big emphasis on that. And when I go on to Joey, because he will be my third and final participant, I will be using you and Ariana's statements to kind of formulate and compare it with his, and then make my final concluding statement. But genuinely, when I say this, is that what I've been seeing this pattern coming from is that it's, in terms of becoming more sustainable, becoming more eco-friendly, it's gonna have to start becoming more hands-on. And I've been seeing that because, again, Ariana's background was that she's homeschooled, she was traveling across the world, she was an entrepreneur, she's starting up Caveman Update. And what I'm learning is that, again, the emphasis needs to be more hands-on, and that education systems, they're more systemic, they're more producing this information and like, hey, here you go. Now, what did I tell you? And that's what they're expecting. With this class, for example, that I'm in, it's more free thinking and more hands-on and labor-based. And I think that by doing so, we're getting to that. Like, for example, I was not the person to be super environmentally aware, but now after being in this class, I've been seeing that. And that's why I chose to do my project this way, in this format, because I want to see how other people, think about this, people who haven't been in this class. So thank you, Allie, because you provided, kind of my, not assumption, but my hypothesis that, yeah, people know what's going on, but they also know that if we want to enforce this and create positive behavior, it has to be more hands-on, even in higher education. But if we want to invest and be the best we can for the future, we also have to start early and focus on the new generations that are coming out, that are rolling in at schools. And, it's very important. So, what? Thank you very much, Ali. Now I'm going to conclude this segment now. I'm going to stop recording in 3, 2, 1. Thank you.